Christ according to Mark.
Glory to you, Lord Christ.
Jesus and his disciples passed through Galilee. He did not want anyone to know it, for he was teaching his disciples, saying to them, "The Son of Man is to be betrayed into human hands, and they will kill him. And 3 days after being killed, he will rise again." But they did not understand what he was saying and were afraid to ask him. Then they came to Capernaum, and when he was in the house, he asked them, "What were you arguing about on the way?" But they were silent, for on the way they had argued with one another who was the greatest. He sat down, called the 12, and said to them, "Whoever wants to be first must be last of all and servant of all." Then he took a little child and put it among them. And taking it in his arms, he said to them, "Whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me welcomes not me, but the one who sent me." The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Christ. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O God, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. So this morning I want to talk about anxiety. This little light topic. I was thinking, like, if I put a piece of paper in all the pews and gave you all like a pencil to write with and said, "Okay, I'm going to time this for 3 minutes, and you write about all the things you're anxious about these days," I bet none of you would look up. Writing. Time would go off, and you would still have plenty more to write. But we prayed together as a community that we asked God, please help us not be anxious. And in reading the lesson from James, I think anxiety is what is fueling a lot of the envy and selfish ambition that he is talking about. Anxiety about proving our worth, proving our value, not just for ourselves, but in our perception of what others think of us, is at the heart of why the disciples are arguing about who is the greatest. And I think even Jesus, who shares our human nature, is getting filled with anxiety as he walks toward death, and the team he has around him is not living up to who he wants them to be. So I think anxiety permeates a topic for our lessons this morning. So I want to share a little lesson I learned about anxiety, and God's using it as a teaching tool in my life. So several years ago, it was March. I think we had an early Easter that year. And I decided after the, hubbubaloo of Easter and Lent and all that, I needed to be on retreat. But in my anxiety world at the time, I did not have my usual time for retreat. I feel should be at least a week. And when I go on retreats, I want a silent retreat. But I didn't have a week. So I had a Sunday afternoon till a Wednesday morning, 2.5 days, 3 nights. And thanks be to God, if you have never been, there is an incredible monastery just down the road from us, the Carmelite Monastery here in Baltimore. It is actually the first monastery in the United States. And it is a monastery because the life of the community is centered on prayer. The sisters are cloistered. It's not a convent where the sisters go out into the world and do work and then come together to live communally. Carmelites were founded by St. Teresa of Avila, a Spanish mystic from the 15th century, who had intense experiences of God. You might picture that Bernini statue in Italy somewhere where she's being pierced by an arrow. And she felt that some vocations in the Christian religious life should purely be for prayer individually and prayer on behalf of the world. Now you might imagine when I first discovered the Carmelites, I'm always a little nervous when I go into a Roman Catholic community, how I will be welcomed as a female Episcopal priest. And they have daily Eucharist, and I wanted to go for Eucharist. And they, of course, were like, "Oh, come on in. You're one of us, no problem." They, of course, were very, very welcoming. And I developed a relationship with Sister Barbara Jean. She's my spiritual director. And so naturally, she always said to me, "Well, if you ever need a retreat place, You can't go far, come here. They have a cell, although it's a lovely little, one-bedroom room with a kitchenette, and stay with us and be a part of our community. So that's what I did. Now, in the monastery, their main meal is dinner, but dinner is served at noon, right? And because I was professional religious, they gave me the honor of even going into the cloistered area to get my dinner. Usually they will bring it to the retreatant in their room, but they let me see the library and the books. I was like, can I read here? They're like, no. Like, we're letting you just come into this part. That's all we're going to let. So I had a lovely retreat filled with quiet, and found myself on the second day fastidiously cleaning the coffee maker. Because one of the things that happens when you're on retreat is you start to get a little anxious. You're all by yourself. You have no screens. There's only so much reading you can do, only so many naps you can take, so many times you can walk outside and look. So things in your life start bubbling up that you're anxious about. And all of a sudden, as I'm cleaning, and I was like, you know what? Actually, my spiritual practice on this retreat is going to be fastidiousness to cleaning. Cleanliness is next to godliness, right? And I am going to keep this room clean like they have never seen it before. You know what? I'm going to sit in those prayer services. I'm going to be the perfect retreatant. That's what I'm going to do. And when I leave this place, Sister Barbara Jean is going to be like, wow, Arianne, we've never had anyone like you here at the Carmelite Monastery for, 100 or so years they've been there. So that was in my head. So it was my last night there. I want to reiterate how quiet a monastery is. They don't talk mostly, and the great silence happens every day from at least 7 p.m. Onwards into the next morning. And that particular day, I had my dinner. I was hungry at 7, so they had these little frozen entrees in the kitchenette, and I decided to make myself one. It was a fish dinner. And I made it, and I ate it, and I fastidiously cleaned up afterwards. And I sat there reading, and I was like, really reeks of fish in this room now. Like, really reeks. And this is going to ruin my whole plan. Because they're going to come here tomorrow morning when I check out, and they're going to be like, wow, what's she doing here? It smells. So I thought to myself, hey, I saw some air freshener in the bathroom. So I go to the bathroom, I grab the Glade freshener, and in my mind, I'm going to press the button and do a 360, and the smell of crisp, clean linen will then permeate the air. So I stand there. Again, it is so quiet. I press the button, looking this way, when all of a sudden a concentrated stream of mist shoots straight up into the air, where there's a fire alarm directly above me. And I let go of the button, and there's this moment of pregnant pause. And then, like the loudest fire alarm you can possibly imagine in the whole retreat center, throughout the Carmelites. You're all hanging and sleeping and being holy. And there's nothing I can do. I can't do anything. I just stand there. Sweet sisters come running down the hall in their habits with their iPhones to make sure, I haven't set the place on fire. There's some Mother Superior who didn't look happy. There was another nun, I can't remember her, and then there's Sister Barbara Jean, my director, and she's giggling. and I mean, you know what I felt like, right? I mean, you know that feeling. And the two sisters, the Mother Superior and the other sister left, and Sister Barbara Jean, she's like, well, what happened? And I explained, and I just confessed the whole nonsense of my perfection. And she was uproarious, doubled over laughing. She's like, wow, what an incredible grace God showed you on this retreat. God could take your sense of perfection and just shatter it for all of us to learn from. And she was so right. And I often think of this as I struggle with a lot of my anxieties about proving myself, to my concept of God, to the people who matter to me, when I worry about what it is other people are thinking, and when I mess up and make mistakes. Those disciples, first of all, Jesus has just told them for the 3rd time that he's going to be rejected, killed, and rise again. And that news is not rational in any way, and it's completely upsetting and unsettling. Of course, They are confused. And of course, they don't even want to talk to him about it anymore because they've seen how they disappointed him already this far on the journey. I totally get how that riles up your anxiety and causes you to not be a nice person. When something is in front of you that you can't control and is dark and looming, we tend to have a hard time being our best selves in those situations. And they had just failed at something in front of themselves, in front of Jesus, and in front of the crowd. Right before this passage, a father, comes bringing his son, who is convulsing, who is foaming at the mouth, who is dying, and he begs the disciples to please heal my child. And they try, and they can't do it. And so the father goes to Jesus and says, well, maybe you can do it. And Jesus does. And the disciples go to Jesus and they say, why didn't it work? And he says, you guys didn't pray. Once again, you faithless generation, you guys didn't pray. Kind of harsh. And I wonder if their prayer at this point, they're just so concerned about what's going to happen. They're so concerned about getting it right that maybe they're saying the words of prayer, maybe they're doing whatever it is they do in that time and place with prayer, but they're not open because they're just too scared and too anxious and too unsure of what's happening. So they don't pray in that way. When Sister Barbara Jean gave me permission to laugh at myself, it was utterly freeing. How many times has someone made you feel a very different way when you've made a big mistake? How many times have yourself or someone you know completely walked away from a religious community or a church because they were shamed or humiliated by somebody who is a religious authority? And we all can think uncomfortably of those times we do that to other people. Nobody likes to feel anxiety. And if Jesus shared our human nature, then I don't think Jesus liked to feel it either. And I think the reason why he takes a time out after this third reprimand is because he realizes he's got to stop yelling at these guys. It's not going to open them up to where he needs them to be. So he doesn't laugh, but he does. He says he sits down, he gathers them around, and he invites a child into his arms. Now instantly, just having the child there is completely going to change the tenor of the room. And what does that child represent? Why does he say, whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes not just me, but the one who sent me, God. A child is vulnerable. A child is dependent. A child is trusting and usually has no problem asking for help. A child is curious and looks at the world with wonder, not judgment. We tend to learn that self-criticism and that criticism of others as we go over, but not at the get-go. We're open and willing, and children are usually a lot more present to what is happening here and now. They're not thinking about the past and worrying about the future. They're just there. So in your life, where do you need those things? More vulnerability, more asking for help, more trusting, more dependence. These are all words that we're usually not comfortable with. We'd rather be strong and in control and figuring everything out on our own. Where do you need to welcome one such child in God's name? And how is anxiety manifesting in your life in a way you need to investigate with some curiosity? There's a prayer on the cover of your bulletin that is a shortened version of something St. Augustine came to at the end of his life, way back in the 400s. Dear Lord, help me know myself so that I may know Thee. Jesus asked the disciples, what are you arguing about on the way? We are all on the way. And we spend a lot of time thinking we're either on the way up or we're on the way down. That's not on the way with Jesus. It's looking inward, seeing what God is trying to teach us through the experiences in our lives. And it's having the courage to do that work, trusting that Jesus is right there, ready, willing, and able, and wanting us to live into that child that we're created to be. Amen.